guys, I want to give a heads up and a bit of a content warning for this episode. Our guest of honor is Sylvia Plath, the phenomenal poet. Sylvia suffered from severe depression and ultimately died by suicide. While we often discuss mental health on here and will continue to do so, this one is uniquely focused on some topics that can be pretty triggering for many. If you are one of them, please be aware before diving in. Each episode, my guest and I will have a good conversation about a woman they find inspiring, and then we will have a meal together themed around that woman's life. It could be her favorite dish, or one that played an important role in her life, or even just something central to her work or culture. This episode, I am sitting down with my smart, beautiful, articulate, poetess daughter, Ava. She's my ride or die. Ava Juliet Walker. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose the proto-emo chick, Sylvia Plath, as your guest of honor?
Hi, all. I'm Ava. My mom is the host of Dinner for Her. I chose Sylvia Plath because I remember in a couple years ago reading The Bell Jar for the first time, and I found it just to resonate really deeply, and I found her past to be really interesting and inspiring in some ways. Also, just her life in general to be very interesting and kind of sad, and if in some ways. So,
I think also just being an English major and a deep thinker and a lover of poetry, she just kind of like resonates with.
Yeah,
it's like a rite of passage almost.
Yeah, I feel like she resonates pretty deeply with a lot of like young poets, especially women. So, do you want to give us a little bit of a quick biography on Sylvia? Yeah, absolutely. I wrote up a little something. Sylvia was born on October 27th, 1932 in Boston, Massachusetts. She was a poet and a novelist known most famously for her poem Lady Lazarus and her novel The Bell Jar. Sylvia can be credited for making major waves in the genre of confessional poetry and women's movement literature. Sylvia was the daughter of Otto Plath and Aurelia Schober. Her father died when she was 8 years old. Sylvia sold her first short story to 17 magazine when she was still in high school. After high school, she attended Smith College and won a number of awards in fictional writing contests. While in college, Sylvia suffered from severe anxiety and depression and even attempted suicide a number of times. During this time, she was admitted to psychiatric hospitalization. In 1956, after graduating college, despite her hardships, she went on to marry English poet Ted Hughes. Ted and Sylvia had 2 children before getting divorced in 1956, following Ted's affair with another woman. The Bell Jar was originally released in 1963 under a pseudonym Victoria Lucas. The novel follows a lot of parallels to Plath's personal life and experiences in the hospital, and it is rumored that that's why she published the novel under a pseudonym. In the first years prior to her death, Plath wrote at a very quick speed and released works that revealed things about herself that she had not previously discussed in her writings or delved into. The novel follows many parallels of Plath's personal life and experiences in the hospital, and it's rumored that that is why she published the novel under the pseudonym. In the few years prior to her death, Plath wrote at a very quick speed and released works that revealed things about herself that she had not previously discussed in her writings. In the year before her death, Plath wrote a letter to her mother explaining why she felt the drive and recognizing the importance of these poems to her, and then she committed suicide in February of 1963.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So when you told me that you wanted to cover Sylvia Plath, you and I had a good laugh about that, because Sylvia's been a little bit of a bane of contention between the two of us since you discovered the bell jar.
Yeah.
Like, we have gone back and forth about that. And what is my favorite quote that I always say about how I feel about Sylvia and how she chose to end her life?
I don't remember. Remind me.
We don't kill ourselves
over men
because it's tacky.
Yes. Yeah.
And
so.
And that is really so. I discovered Sylvia Plath when I was a young, deep thinking, very emotional teenager as well, just like most people do. And that's something that you get from me. Everybody knows you and I are very much like to dig into deep conversation. We're kind of dramatic. We have a big dramatic streak, and we also love language and we love words. So it's not surprising that we both found Sylvia Plath, but it worried me a little bit when you said that she was somebody that you admired when you were in college, because my memory of how I found Sylvia and then fell out of love with Sylvia, in my mind, I had a lot of contempt for her. I felt like she was just melodramatic, and that she was just the archetype of somebody who just sucked all the air out of the room, that she deliberately, played up her worst instincts, her worst impulses, and was self-indulgent about that. And I thought it was selfish that she killed herself when she had children home, and that she did it over a man. That was how I remembered my feelings about her. But this week, like I do before all of these episodes, I go back and I start digging into that person's life and their work, and I start trying to find out more about who they are, and just, even if it's somebody I know really well, I like to give myself a refresher. And I did not want to do that with Sylvia. Like, I didn't want to do it at all. I didn't want to dig into her brain. And it wasn't even like, in my mind, it wasn't that I consciously felt like it was because of my own discomfort. It was just, I didn't think I was that interested in her. But as I've gone back and I've listened to her poetry this week, and I've read more of her biography, and I've read more about her life and her marriage and her work as a grown woman, as a 49-year-old woman, instead of a 16-year-old girl, having lived far beyond where Sylvia lived, I see that a lot of my feeling about her has more to do with my own trauma and my own recognition in her of some of my worst, most dangerous impulses, self-destructive impulses. And I've realized it's not so much that I'm angry at her. I am just so angry that I can't save her.
Yeah, that you just can't go back, and she's just one of those historical people that you just wish you could talk to in a modern day.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, which may or may not have helped the case at all, but it would just, I get what you're saying.
First of all, I think this is a good place to start, is that I listened to Lady Lazarus. Was one of the first things that I dug into this week, is that I started looking around to refresh myself about some of her poetry, and I found that she recorded herself for a BBC radio program doing a lot of her poems that were in the one book of poetry that was published in her lifetime, Ariel.
Yeah.
And I also didn't know, I don't know if you know this, but I think you covered it in the bio, but I don't know if it really clicked with you, that all of the work that she published, for the most part, Bell Jar, Ariel...
Pseudonym.
Well, it was also written in the time when she was her most depressed.
Like 3 years before she died. Yeah, that was I kind of covered that a little bit at the end of the biography. She wrote all of this stuff like 3 years before she died, and then she was like getting concerned. Her mother obviously was getting concerned, and she wrote a letter to her mother explaining why she like felt the drive to get all of these works out, and why she never felt motivated like this like she had before, and why she felt more inclined to dive deeper into like her emotions and whatnot. And then she ended up like she was trying to make her mother feel better about that, and then she ended up killing herself like a few months later.
She had like this creative burst the last couple of years when things were the absolute shittiest in her life, and that was so interesting and just heartbreaking too. So just to get a little bit deeper into Sylvia and where she came from a fairly privileged background. Her parents were not wealthy, but they were intellectuals. Her mother was a professor, which was unusual for the time. Her father wrote a book about bees. He was also a very intelligent man. They were both, her mother, I think, was a first generation American. Her parents were from Austria. Her father, I believe, was born in Germany, which explained some of the Nazi imagery that she uses in her poetry. She was raised by, intellectuals. She was encouraged in her gifts. She was encouraged in her freedom. She wasn't as repressed as some women and girls were in the 50s. She internalized a lot of that into herself. I started reading her biography, and I started seeing, some places here and there where I was like, wow, she was really high achieving as a young person. I knew, of course, that the Bell Jar was about when she was loosely based on when she really did win a contest to be junior editor for Mademoiselle magazine.
And she a big part of the Bell Jar is that aided in her declining mental state, because she really did not want to do that, but she was continuously being told that was what she should do because she's a female who wants to write.
Yeah, I think her whole life, it sounds like she, from a very young age, was torn always between wanting to be a normal girl, and I'm using air quotes here, normal girl, a normal woman of the 50s, to have a home life, to have security, to have a man that was a protector, but then also was deeply invested, and ambitious, and had goals and dreams and ideas for herself.
Well, that's where the whole fig tree thing in the Bell Jar comes into play too. And that's honestly one of my favorite things that Sylvia Plath has contributed to writing, really, is the fig tree analysis, when she just talks about how she sees her life branching out in front of her like a fig tree.
Actually, I've got that up here. Why do you want to read that portion from the Bell Jar?
I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, and another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was E.G., the amazing editor, and another fig was Europe and Africa and South America, and another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions, and another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest, and as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plopped at the ground of my feet.
Man, I recognize myself in that so much.
Yeah.
And you. I mean, we are people that want to do everything.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to accept. Because what's another one of my famous quotes?
You can have everything, or you can have anything you want, you just can't have everything you want.
Right, which I learned through hard experience, because that depressed the shit out of me when I was a young person. Well,
for me, when I first read that actually, in a weird way, like it's depressing, in a weird way, it gave me some sort of like optimism and recognition that there was this woman who was a brilliant, smart author that also felt that way, which I know she had a very bleak like end of her life, but it was nice to see somebody else who felt that way. You know?
And that kind of gets into the heart of what depresses me so much about her is, and frustrates me and makes me angry. Like, I was talking to Becky earlier today because I knew this was going to be trickier than I thought it was going to be to have this conversation. I thought that the problem was going to be that I didn't have as much interest in this subject.
Yeah.
What I've discovered is that I have avoided her for 30-something years because she triggers me so much, because I see so much of myself in her, and I think there, but for the grace of God, that kind of thing, that in a different world I could have made the choices that she made. I'm not trying to say I'm anything like as brilliant as Sylvia Plath was. You know, one of the things that I love and admire most about you is that you have the ability to write very good poetry, in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased, but I don't think I'm too biased, because I've gotten a lot of other people who have told me that your words touch them. I don't have that ability. I can't self-edit enough to really produce good poetry. She can. She could. She was phenomenal at it, finding the right words. I mean, sometimes she was a little bit hokey and a little bit melodramatic, but nobody lands it every time. Mostly what I found was this woman who had ambition and drive and goals, and on the best days, and I believe that even with somebody, because like her first suicide attempt was in childhood.
Yeah.
You know, and then she did it again when she was 20, and then she did it again a few months, I think, within the same year of when she was finally successful. But that only tells part of the story. If you read her words, I think you should go back, and I've started listening on Spotify. You can, if you have the premium membership, you get a certain amount of book hours every month. Her journal entries are...
Well, I've read the unabridged journals.
Have you really?
I mean, I have it, but it's also one of those things that, like, I was talking to one of my friends at work who used to be an English teacher, and she loves Sylvia Plath. And she was talking about the unabridged journals too, and it's just, we were talking about how it's not something that you can sit down and read in one sitting,
right? Because
a lot of it is just
nonsense from her day,
and it's just like nonsense and stuff. But then
some of it's so funny,
but then you find those things in there that's just like so hard hitting, and like, wow, this is like really how she lived her everyday life. This was what her brain was like,
right? And
like, there's a number of entries in there just about her feeling trapped and stuff, and it is really like very depressing, but it is.
But there's also a lot of humor in there.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, she was a very funny person.
She was outgoing. She was horny. Sorry, nobody wants to hear their mama say that word, but that girl was.
She was. There were a number
trolling. Like, she reminded me of you in a way.
Yeah.
Like, my college experience wasn't quite like that. I didn't come from the same background that Sylvia did. I didn't have the time to really just hang out and live a social life on campus. But when, your young adult life right now with the dating woes that you've got and trying to find a decent guy, and that's a lot of what she writes about.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of what the Bell Jar is about as well, is terrible men and terrible choices in men.
Right.
But
some of them weren't terrible. I mean, sometimes she's the one that's like, ugh, he's a dud.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, what drives me crazy, and why when I was a younger woman, I wanted to blame her for this. Because when I got back to talking to Becky today, she wanted me to be very careful about not coming across as victim blaming her.
Yeah.
She wanted me to, kind of be careful about expressing that I'm not angry at her. And I stopped her and I said, I am angry at her.
Yeah.
I'm not victim blaming anymore.
Yeah.
I do think I was doing that to a certain degree.
It's the difference between empathy and sympathy too, this situation a lot as well. Because you can have empathy here, but you may not feel sorry, Yeah,
well, but I do feel, I think I have both for her now.
Yeah.
My frustration comes from just that, like, it's my wound is what it is.
Yeah.
It's the fact that when I'm listening to her and I'm thinking about, there's one of the poems that she did in those final years was a poem called Tulips. And goes in, like, she's in the mental hospital. I think it was after her last unsuccessful attempt. They've put her in a mental institution for a while, and she's just laying there, and she's trying not to be. She's just trying to shut all of the noise down in her head.
That's a large portion of the bell jar as well.
Yeah.
That's a large portion of the bell jar.
I think that was just a running thing with her depression.
And like another thing too is it's really difficult to completely understand her situation, because nowadays we have, I mean, obviously it's still a war on women, definitely 100%, but nowadays we have access to a bit more than she had access to at the time for like as far as mental health resources and stuff go.
Right.
So what I found at a young age most interesting about the bell jar is how it delves into how women were treated in psychiatric hospitals and stuff. Mm-hmm. And the fact that she had a male psychiatric nurse who was very clearly not listening to her and just continued, this fictional character, but it is closely paralleled with her own life. But the fictional character had like a male psychiatric doctor who was not listening to her, just kept giving her meds and electric shock therapy. And then she got a female doctor who she thought was going to listen to her. And this female doctor was like, yes, I am going to listen to you. I am going to take you seriously and stuff. And then she just puts her right back into electric shock therapy. And her brain just starts, like, the way that Sylvia was able to write as someone, like, put it into words as somebody whose brain was just deteriorating towards the end of the book.
Yeah.
It was just, like, the way that she was able to use words, and you genuinely felt like you were in the brain of somebody that had been through electric shock therapy. It was very crazy.
Than clarifying her depression, it literally gave her brain damage for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, it is one thing to be like, what she did was, what she did do was selfish and terrible. And there's every right to feel this way towards her, but it's also, she wasn't given the same opportunity as modern women are when it comes to mental health.
And I no longer feel like, after looking back at her life at my age, I don't feel like she was selfish or terrible. It was a selfish act. My anger is all from, again, my own projection. It's because I like, going back to tulips, she's describing how she's in the hospital, and someone, you assume probably Ted, sent her these tulips. And the tulips are bothering her because they're too bright. They're too red. They are making her feel things that she doesn't want to feel. They're making her feel intimidated. It reminded me of the Yellow Wallpaper. Yeah. By Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who I know you've liked that one as well. Yeah. There was a lot of parallel there.
Yes.
That, between gifted women who may have a genetic predisposition for depression, but certainly the roles that they are forced to choose from are exacerbating that. When she's talking about the tulips, babe, I know, like, that feeling of her brain being on fire. Yeah. I know I've told you about that I had a bad episode when you were a baby. Yeah, like the postpartum. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it was just, I've had depression my whole life. Yeah. My first major depression started when I was 11 years old. 10 and a half, 11 years old. And I got, highs and lows throughout my middle school and high school years. But when I was in my 20s, I had a really bad one that started my senior year of high school and lasted up to about 2021. But once I got into my 20s, your dad and I met, and I started to have the most stable period of my life. And I thought I had cured depression by positive thinking. And then we moved to Charlotte when you were a baby, and your dad went on the road, and it was just me and you at home. Now, you were already 10 months old when we moved there. Most people think of postpartum as being right after. Yeah. I think that I probably never really, I think it definitely was hormonal to a certain degree. I don't think, the fact that I am doing so much better now at almost 50 is just about the fact that I have, done all of the things that I need to do to take care of myself. I think truly part of it is hormonal.
Yeah.
That being said, when she's talking about that, it took me back to this day that, about the flowers and how they're upsetting her and they're bothering her and they're making her feel very uncomfortable. It made me think about in that period when we moved to Charlotte and I lost it. I was down the rabbit hole. That's how I always think. She calls it the bell jar, and I just always called it down the rabbit hole. And I was down the rabbit hole, and overnight it felt like, but at that point, you just do what you have to do when you have a child. And, I tell you this sometimes, Bugs, and I don't think I want you to know, like, when I tell you saved my life in a lot of ways, you saved my life, because I never would take medication before because, in my family, I know I've mentioned this on this podcast before, people would say only crazy people take this. And I didn't want to be this weak person that had to take a pill to make them happy. Yeah. But when you have a baby, you'll do anything. Yeah, you do. It doesn't matter anymore whether or not this makes you weak. Yeah. But I wouldn't have done that had I not had you to take care of. But at any rate, before I started settling into my medicine, we would have to come back to Nashville sometimes while your dad was on the road because I couldn't trust I felt like there was no safety anywhere in the world. And my brain was on fire all the time. And there was this one specific day that we were at Tammy's house. Yeah. And you were probably 13 months or so by then. And you were, in there with Tammy, being spoiled, my sister Tammy, being spoiled rotten, I'm sure, all of that. And I was laying in the bed in there trying to take a nap because I hadn't slept in days. And I genuinely felt like I need to be in a mental institution right now. Yeah. And it was exhausting. It was exhausting. You were tired all day long. Then night came and you couldn't fall asleep.
So, it probably, like, when you delved more into Sylvia Plath this week, it probably felt very similar to the way that I felt when I first read The Bell Jar when I was a teenager, in that someone else felt this way at some point. And it sucks, like, if you think about the way that she died, but it's also like, well, it still at least feels like a little bit, in a way, nice to know that there was somebody that felt this way. And they've felt this way long before I was even alive. Right.
Right. It helps you to see that a lot of depression is an anxiety, and I hope to God you can go the rest of your life. I don't think you've ever had like a major depression. No. But you do have anxiety.
I have I would say relatively pretty bad anxiety, but I've never had like a major depressive episode.
Right. And I hope to God you can go the rest of your life, and you never do. The difference between you and Sylvia and young man, you have support. I hope you always know that you have support and help and people that understand. She didn't have that. It was a different time. And I guess I think what I discovered about myself this week is that when I read that stuff about her, part of why I did judge her is because I felt like I conquered depression. Yeah.
I got through it. Why couldn't she have? Right. She had children,
Exactly.
But also, and that's where I bring in this other argument, not argument, but like other point of contention, I guess, where like you also had the resources and the ability to get medication and find things like that. She didn't. And
she didn't have.
And on top of that,
but it was not the same.
She also had a terrible husband and people in her family.
And this is where we gotta start getting into Ted fucking Hughes, that son of a bitch. Yeah. So,
segue.
Yeah, hard segue. And I always knew about Ted, and again, I was very judgy about her letting a man drive her to that. Yeah. What I did not appreciate, because again, when I say that, I judged her, I never read her again past the age of 20. Yeah. I'm not talking after. What I was able to bring to my understanding of her now is the Mandy that went through that very, very horrible time. When I read her back as a kid, I judged her because it was too terrifying for me to go back there. I will say that one of the things that always bugs me about, and I've been very theatrical people, even though I can be one of them, it's some of what I see in her is some of the things that I don't like about myself, of the way that I can just take all the air out of the room, the way that I can
people who wake up every day with like I'm gonna resonate in my sadness kind of thing. Like I'm just gonna sit here and be upset, and I'm gonna find reasons to be upset. Right.
And I felt like she was one of those people, but she was not.
Yeah.
I was wrong about that.
Yeah. The unabridged journals will shows a lot of the other aspects of her personality.
She tried and tried and tried
to feel better.
She wanted to live.
Yeah.
Like there is a quote that she had, it was in one of her journals, "For all my despair, for all my ideals, for all that, I love life. But it is hard, and I have so very much to learn."
Yeah.
I mean, this woman wanted to survive, and she was doing it. I will never, ever, ever stop blaming Ted fucking Hughes for the death of this brilliant woman.
Yeah.
Did she have a history? Yes, absolutely she did. Could she be, because one of the things that drove me crazy, so Ted was, this poet, wonderkin, whatever, in Cambridge when she came there, and she was really enamored of his poetry, and as we've said, she really wanted to find, she did have this old-fashionedness about her, of this idea of finding a man and having a family, and I think she thought that would solve everything for her, which again, is another thing that resonated with me, because that was part of what was so hard for me to accept when you were a baby and you were everything I had ever wanted. I thought that having, a stable home life, a husband that loved me, and this beautiful, perfect child who, from the moment you came out of my womb, you and I have been besties, like we've just gotten each other. But it didn't cure that.
Yeah.
And the difference, like you pointed out, is that I had your dad, who may not have ever, didn't always know the right thing to say or do, but he was always on my side. He never gave up on me. He would fly me back home, so that I could be around family when he had to go on the road.
Yeah.
He called his mom, when I went to the psychiatric emergency room, and thank God I have the best mother-in-law in the world, which I've mentioned many times, and she told him, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
My mother had it. She cannot help what she's going through, you need her. And I had that.
Yeah, so like the point that I was like trying to make a minute ago too is like imagine feeling the way that you felt during like the postpartum thing and everything, and then on top of that having a husband who belittled you, didn't understand you, didn't give you the help that you needed, and was cheating on you at the same time.
Cheating on you over and over and over again, and beating her.
At the same time going through all. I did not know about that.
Yeah,
that is really crazy.
She wrote letters back home to her mother after they finally split up, telling her that she had a miscarriage between having her daughter, her first and second child. She had a miscarriage because he beat her 2 days beforehand.
Oh my God. I hate this guy.
I hate
him. I hate him.
The fact that England went on to make him their poet laureate just kills my soul. I've let this process has allowed me. I'm so glad you picked her, because I'm glad I got to go back. Justice for Sylvia. I have been wrong about her all these years. Could she be a bit of a sad girl, emo girl? Yes, but she absolutely was not someone who was just lying about, wallowing in their pain. She was spinning straw into gold. She did not want to die. She wanted to live when her disease was not setting her brain on fire. And that's what breaks my heart. And that is what I think I didn't want to deal with. I think subconsciously I didn't want to look at her, because I could see in her, it took me straight back to that feeling of there being no safety anywhere in the world, of there being no hope, that there is no, like, listening to her journals, it's like so crazy how that's how my brain works. Like, even in the good times, even in the best of times, you know, that's how my brain works, is that, like, every day I could sit and deconstruct the very best thing in the world and break it down to why nothing really matters in the end.
Yeah.
And I have to work my way away from that. And I have, and I've done the work, and I have the cognitive behavioral therapy. And I always say, too, like, the difference between me and a lot of people who suffered chronic depression their whole life is that I have this inner Karen, I call her, that has always, no matter at the worst, felt like it was my fault, felt like I deserved this. And some little spark in there told me, you are not going to let this beat you. This will not be what defines your life. And Sylvia had that spark. And I think that son of a bitch, isolating her. She had one baby that was a toddler, and then had another pregnancy in the middle of that where she miscarried from a beating. And then she had an 8-month-old. So she probably also had all this postpartum stuff going on. And in the midst of all that, this son of a bitch cheats on her. Didn't just cheat on her. What we failed to mention is he cheated on her with one of their good friends.
Yeah.
Like, he told her...
I did know that.
Yeah, he told her he wanted to move to the countryside, which further isolated her in this country that's not her own, and rented out their apartment to this couple that were friends of hers, and then proceeded to start an affair with the woman that was the wife in that couple. Then was in bed with her when Sylvia was... I mean, he left... You know, Sylvia, they broke up... But he knew that his wife was suicidal. He knew that she was in terrible, terrible health. Left these 2 children with her and was literally holed up with this woman in their marital apartment while Sylvia was killing herself.
Oh. No, I found one of my favorite quotes from the unabridged journals, too. And I'm almost positive she wrote this quote at the time of being with Ted Hughes, if not, like, right before or they had known each other. And the quote is, it's very sad, but the quote is, I want so obviously, so desperately to be loved and to be capable of love. I am still so naive. I know pretty much what I like and dislike, but please don't ask me who I am. A passionate, fragmentary girl, maybe. And it's just so sad that he made her feel this way.
Right. Well, you know, I mean, that was he was, like I always tell you, those men... They can smell daddy issues from a mile away.
Yeah, she did write a lot of her poems that she wrote right before she decided to kill herself were about her very terrible relationship with her father before he passed away. And she was 8 when he passed away.
Actually, from what I can gather, they didn't have a terrible relationship. She idolized him. She didn't really know him. She was 8 when he died. Yeah. He was a figure in her mind. And she seemed to always be looking for somebody to take that role on. And in her mind, he was stern, authority. You know, she loved him. Apparently, like, that was her first major depression was when her father died. So she loved him. But apparently, the archetype of this strong, silent, you know, alpha type male was what she had in her head. And she started to, I think, recognize there at the end, if you read the poetry in Ariel, Lady Lazarus, Daddy especially, she started to see that maybe she was looking for all of that in Ted. Yeah. And the core was rotten. Yeah. She was seeing that.
Oh, she was very clearly angry when she finished Lady Lazarus. Like the last few lines that I was just talking to you about today. Yeah. When she says, I rise out of the ash with my red hair and I eat men like air.
Yeah. I mean, she was definitely starting to recognize, but I think that...
And there's another quote from Lady Lazarus where she says, this is from the Bell Jar, but she says, the trouble was I hated the idea of serving men in any way. Yeah. And that she was very funny. Yes. She was very funny.
That's the thing, is that I think that she had this young, natural romantic and sexual urges. She was heterosexual, or at least she was there. I think I saw somewhere today that there was some talk that she maybe was bisexual, and maybe she was, but she clearly was attracted to men, and she was clearly attracted to Ted.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. He just has that F-boy look on his face every time I see him. I told you in that one picture what made me mad is that little slightly embarrassed smirk that he's got on his face while she's standing next to him beaming and happy. Why do men do that? Like they're doing you a favor by being around you. That is one of the least attractive thing about predominantly young men. Most of them, if they are going to become decent, get over that.
And then girls are just like, he just hates pictures. And it's like...
No, he hates pictures with you.
He hates you.
Yes. He has utter contempt for you, is what it is. This is very funny. I meant to tell you about it the other day, but that reminds me, I actually saw something that Bella, my best friend Bella, had sent me, and it was this girl, and she posted something, and she was like, men kiss girls they don't like, and then it was like somebody responded and sent like a meme of like holding her hand, and it said, baby, they marry women they don't like. Yeah, and that's a tough thing that a lot of them, and we've talked about how as they age, that becomes less and less charming, and the shithead Ted Hugheses of the world start to recognize that all the womanizing in the world is not going to fill up the giant hole where their personality should be.
Yeah.
Incidentally, the woman that he was cheating with ended up having a child with him, and 4 years after Sylvia died, she killed herself in exactly the same way, only she took her child out with her.
Wow, so he's a walking plague.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think his daughter cares for him.
I would imagine not so, yeah.
He burned her last couple of years of her journals.
Yes,
and claimed
I did know that. I did know that, and it doesn't make me feel better, but I did see this thing where Sylvia Plath's headstone says Sylvia Plath Hughes, and people have gone to it and just completely carved out the Hughes on it, so it just says Sylvia Plath
over and over and over again. Yeah, and the only real great thing
and Ted Hughes' grave is right next to hers, and it's just been completely destroyed. Like, people have just vandalized the crap out of it.
That's the only real, I can't even say it's a bright side. I just think it's one consoling thing is that he was haunted for the rest of his life by her. Like, people never let him forget. It made me angry because apparently his friends, like, they took their friends as a couple, took his side for the most part. So further isolating her. Because I'm sure they were like, she's too much, She's
crazy, yeah.
She's a crazy woman. She's too much. Never mind all of these things that he, him taking his mistresses to, their honeymoon spot and then going to Paris while she's home with their two children struggling with mental illness. Never mind that. But at any rate, didn't save him from the feminist movement. And from the 60s on, Ted Hughes was never allowed to have one day go by where people didn't remind him, you killed one of the greatest poets of the generation. And also that he was an inferior poet. I mean, even though he became
his writing was not even as good as Sylvia Plath's is the crazy thing.
Nowhere near as good as her.
Like,
nowhere near as good as her. And that had to just really eat at him too, as it does all small men, that she was better than him at his own craft. His poetry is just bland, in my opinion. It's just whatever. I've read a couple of them, and then right before he died, he released these poems called like the birthday poems or something, I can't remember, but it was where he was letting the world know that every year on Sylvia's birthday he wrote a poem about her. And right. And they are universally regarded as terrible.
Okay, and like, it's like literally fork found in kitchen. Like, okay, of course you are.
Right.
It's Silver Springs. You're never getting away from the sound of the woman that loved you.
Yes.
Like, of course.
Yes.
Yes, of course you are.
But his poetry, it wasn't even good. I don't even know that. I'm not even going to give him Lindsey Buckingham status. Like, I don't believe for 1 minute that he actually spent time in remorse. Like, I listened to a couple.
No, I'm just saying like the whole trend that Gen Z is doing on TikTok right now. Like, it's literally, I will follow you down to the sound of my voice will haunt you. like Sylvia was haunting him every day. Of course you were writing you were thinking about her every day because you had to.
Yeah. Yes.
No one was going to let you forget that. So it's not like you were doing some great gesture. You felt terrible. But you didn't feel bad when you were doing it. Like, there, once again, like me being my Gen Z brain rot self, there's once again another tweet that's like, men are like, oh, I'm so sad without you. And it was like, baby, you was so full of life when you were cheating on me.
Right.
And it's like...
Yeah.
It's like...
I wonder if Sylvia would have liked TikTok. I
think she would have liked Twitter. I think that she would have thought Twitter was funny.
Oh, she would have eaten him up on Twitter.
No. Some of the tweets, though. Like, I've seen a whole bunch of things about, like, just, like, tweets where people talk about Sylvia and stuff. And I think that she would think that they're funny. I really would.
I think...
Or Pinterest. Sylvia Plath would have eaten Pinterest
She would have enjoyed Pinterest. But that's part of what just breaks my heart is that, like, part of me wants to just go through time and take care of her. And, like, I feel like I understand where she was at and what she needed to hear and, like, the support that she needed. She needed somebody to be there to tell her, this is not you. This is not who you are. This is it's a disease that you occasionally are going to suffer from. You know, man, that analogy, I had forgotten that that's what the bell jar was she had this dread that at any moment this thing could come back down on her and keep her smothered in this tiny little environment, because that's what depression does. Like, people say depressive people are selfish, and they are. But it's their disease. Yeah,
and your brain doesn't allow itself to think about anything else other than the ways that your life sucks.
I listened to an interview with the woman that was a friend of hers that was the last person to see her alive, that she had stayed with her because she wanted to live. Yeah. She went to go stay with this woman for a few days hoping that this was going to pass. Yeah. And distracted was the word that she used, which was part of what was really triggering me today and made me cry was, I think about your dad in the bad times when he would tell me, I can tell because you're completely distracted. Like, I can tell you were only in your own head, which was like horrible, but also really good because it was the first time in my life someone saw me. It was the first time I realized someone cared enough to see.
When I would get in my previous relationship, when I would get very, very, very anxious and overwhelmed and like very, very, and I hate like how much my generation has destroyed the word overstimulated, but it is a genuine thing that would very much so happen a lot.
Well, I think it's an accurate...
And it is. But when that would happen to me and I would be on the verge of like a freak out, it would cause me to not be able to genuinely, if like someone is trying to speak to me, I'm blank stare in front of me. And in my previous relationship, when that would happen, the guy that I was with would be like, hello, and he'd be like, are you about to have a freak out? Because I know exactly what this look is, because I would genuinely just not retain. I'm serious. We could be like driving and he would be trying to give me directions. And if I was overstimulated, I'm not making the turn. Mm-hmm. I don't, like, I'm not making, which is so dangerous.
But you just can't take anything in.
But yeah, like, I'm not making the turn. Like, and he'd be like, go. Like, and I'm like, I didn't hear you. Yeah. I didn't hear you.
Well, and as your mom, this is where I'm going to say this is part of why I keep preaching to you about learning cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm a big proponent of you can learn ways to try to help manage that, but it's not a cure. Yeah. People with issues like Sylvia and me and you and a lot of people, you have these things that are just part of who you are. Most of the time, you can thrive even with those issues, and it breaks my heart that no one was there to tell her that and to be that strength for her that she needed. And
I could not imagine, like, first of all, the depression, and then also she was a very highly anxious person, and I relate to her, I guess, more so on the anxiety side of it. And I cannot imagine having... And she loved her children very much, and her children were the biggest blessing of her life. Mm-hmm. And it was very clear that that was the case. But I cannot imagine being constantly, first of all, depressed, and then overstimulated and anxious, and then also having children on top of that.
Yeah.
Like when I would get in my super, super, super anxious modes where I just cannot retain information, I cannot listen to anything that anybody is telling me, I have to figure out directly what is in front of me, what is on my mind at that moment. I cannot imagine having a child that needed me, you know? Like having multiple children that needed me in that moment, and I'm over here freaking out in my own brain, you know? Like
I do know, but what you may discover one day, and again, this goes back to me telling you that you helped me, and being your mom, being Jack, your brother's mom, helped me in so many ways, is that when you have a child and you're a good mother, and I know if you ever decide to be a mother, you will be a good mother.
Yeah.
When I tell you, Ava, go learn some cognitive behavioral therapy, I know you hear me, and you're like, yeah, it's fine. Yeah. You don't think that it's a bad idea.
I've gotten better about this as well, but...
Do what?
I've gotten better about this as well.
That's
my freakouts where I don't listen to anybody. Like, it happens, like, at work sometimes because I'm a server in a very high-volume restaurant, and when my managers walk up to me and they're like, hey, your table numbers, your seat numbers are wrong. And I'm in the weeds, actively, like, being terrorized by all my tables. And he's like, hey, your seat numbers are wrong. I'm like, oh my God.
Well, waiting tables, like parenting, putting yourself in the trial by fire, I guess I'm saying, is that it can also often be the best motivator for you to genuinely work on learning to manage that.
Yeah.
That is why I learned to manage that. Like having small children who needed me to be present is what caused me to seek out ways, because I very much had this goal that I didn't want to be a screamer and yeller or absentee parent, and so I had to learn ways. So you'll figure it out.
I guess dissociation is what you would most closely compare it to, like
when you're doing
and like I do think at some point, like I do want to be a mother someday, but I have to get the dissociation problem under control first, because like children, you can't dissociate around small children. You can't do that.
And with time, like you won't.
Is it disassociate, right? Disassociate, yeah. You can't do that around small children.
Well, so I have every faith that if
you disassociate for 2 seconds and they're coloring on the wall.
Exactly. Or much worse than that.
Yeah, or getting into the knives.
Or like you remember the story about your brother, which we will not repeat.
Yeah, ew.
So, we're going to get ready to pause for a bit and have dinner, and we will come back after our delicious food is prepared. This one is actually a menu that I'm not dreading, and I'm not going to be eating any of Bambi's friends, but it's something a little unusual, and we'll talk about that when we get ready to sit down and eat. But I do want to read you a poem that I wish I could remember. There was a podcast that was about Sylvia that I found online today that led me to this poem. And if I can figure out which podcast it was, I was working and listening to it at the same time, but if I can figure out what it was, I'll credit it in the show notes and on my Facebook page later. But the poem is called For Sylvia and for Cheeseburgers by Ted Theodore Hughes by Jim Burrell. Jim Burrell is the poet. The name of the poem is For Sylvia.
By Ted Hughes is also in there.
Yes. The name of the poem is For Sylvia and for Cheeseburgers by Ted Theodore Hughes. When I heard you killed yourself, my first thought was, I gotta burn those journals of hers. They make me look like a fucking creep. And then I gotta get a cheeseburger. Yum. Sylvia, you will always be a better poet than me, and I'll always vaguely cash in on the fame of your suicide. But now you're dead, so you'll never get to be poet laureate, which is bad because you would have been a hot one. And I'm going to go cheat on my new wife now and write fox poems for the next 50 years. Have you seen my brown shoes? I guess I'll never find them now. That may be my new favorite poem.
Oh my Lord. That is hilarious.
Yeah, that just gets old Teddy boy.
I love that. I love that so much.
I think that accurately reflects old Teddy boy and how he thought of not just Sylvia, but all the women in his life.
Yeah.
And now we are going to take a pause to go cook us this delicious meal, and we will be back. I'm just putting in some silence here because I'm going to put in music when... It's probably long enough. Okay, we are back and we are getting ready to dig in to the meal that we've prepared that was inspired by Sylvia's life. We are having ribeye, mashed potato cakes, salad, and then for dessert, Sylvia was quite the baker. That was something that she enjoyed doing. It was a big stress relief for her. There was a day when she was really manic that she made like 25 cakes in one day. But one she apparently really liked to make a lot was called a tomato soup cake, which sounds disgusting, but I hear that it actually tastes more like a spice cake. So we're going to find out here in just a few minutes. But when I was looking to figure out what the meal would be for this episode, I couldn't find an entire meal made by Sylvia. But what I did discover is, like a lot of other women that we've covered on this podcast, she really did love to cook, and she had a lot of joy in food. She seemed to be really a woman of her time, though. I mean, she was from the 50s, and they notoriously, cooked with lard. There was a lot of steaks. There was a lot of, starches. I, thank God, wasn't stuck with one of those weird Jell-O mold type of deals. But a lot of the cooking that she did was very typical. Her favorite thing to read in the world was The Joy of Cooking. She said it was like her Bible to her, and it soothed her. And so a lot of the recipes that she got were from that. But I couldn't find like an entire meal that she had planned. However, there's a woman that's been posting every day on Twitter since the beginning of the pandemic food items from Sylvia Plath's personal journals. You can find her on Twitter at What Sylvia Ate. And I went back through the last couple of years and I got some general ideas. And the woman loved her a good steak. And the mashed potato cakes were actually her recipe. I did find that. And I've never met a version of mashed potatoes that I didn't like. So I thought, you know what? If Sylvia was here, I'd like to give her a good old steak and some hearty potatoes and a nice green salad and her favorite desserts. So that's what we did. And I'm going to eat my first bite of steak now and shut up for a second. I can feel my arteries hardening right now as we speak.
It is a very good steak.
Ava, how are the potato cakes? Have you tried them?
Really good, yeah. This might have just unlocked a new favorite food.
I've never had potato cakes. I'm going to give it a whirl.
Fun fact. I was an avid steak hater.
Yep.
For many years of my life.
Yep. It's always wasted on them kids.
I really hated red meat, but I love it now.
This is good. I'm starving. I don't know if you guys could hear it. I guess I'll find out when I go through editing, but right there towards the end before we went to cook, you could literally hear my stomach growling like audibly in this room. That's good stuff. Yeah. So like I said, one of the things, Ava, that I learned was that she really did enjoy. That was another way that I could see that this woman did not just wake up every day in love with death and praying to die. She had a lot of things that brought her joy. I mean, cooking, especially baking, was one of them. The other thing that we have for dessert, besides the spice cake, is Toll House cookies, which cracked me up because I kept reading that she absolutely loved Toll House cookies. She loved to go to the beach. Again, she was not, the 50s version of Wednesday Addams that I'd always kind of envisioned. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love Wednesday Addams. A lot of people have accused me of being the 90s version when I was a kid of Wednesday Addams. But anyway, I just always thought of her as just this uber goth or the proto goth, proto emo girl, as I said. But she was really kind of more of a beach babe. I mean, she liked going to the ocean. She cared very much about having a tan. She thought she didn't look good, pale. Who does that remind me of? Both of us, actually.
Yeah.
We both hate to look.
Except I'm an avid baked tanner.
Yeah, you're a little more healthy about it than me in general. But she loved all that stuff. And anyway, one of her favorite desserts that I kept running across that she loved to take with her to the beach is Toll House cookies, which kind of confused me because I was like, isn't that just like a name brand, Toll House? But turns out that Toll House cookies and the Toll House family of snacks, it actually gets its name from this famous restaurant in Massachusetts where she was originally from called the Toll House Inn, and they created this famous cookie recipe, chocolate chip cookie recipe, that I guess that Nestle eventually just bought the name Toll House because it had the name recognition for it. But this is one of the 2 recipes that were, or 3 recipes that were really her recipe. This was straight a few years back. The Ted Hughes' family, again profiting off of her death, they sold. Isn't it good? Rudy wants some. The dog wants some. I shouldn't say that because I actually think it was her daughter, and God knows Frida deserves every penny she can get. She named her daughter Frida after Frida Kahlo.
Oh, that's so cool.
They sold like 20 of her original handwritten recipe cards. So the Toll House cookie recipe I actually got straight up from her, and it is very good. We're probably eating half a pound of butter in this meal.
The steak, the tater cakes,
all of that.
The baking.
I'm going to try this spice cake because I'm curious. I want to know what it tastes like. Tomato soup cake sounds like it should be gross. It is not. Oh my gosh, that is good.
Really? Okay, hold on.
Think about carrot cake.
I love carrot cake.
You're going to like it.
What are the little bits in it?
It's just walnuts. You could have added raisins, and I didn't because I don't hate myself.
I love raisins.
Well, you can put raisins in yours next time.
Yeah, it's good. They just taste like that literally just tastes like if you like during fall when you go to like coffee shops and they have like spice cake. That's just what it tastes like.
Yeah, it's got a really pretty flavor or color to it.
Yeah,
it's like this deep, like burnt orange kind of color.
Yeah,
and the cream cheese icing. I mean, it's so rich, but it's delicious. Very moist.
Really good.
Did you have some more quotes?
Oh, I did. One of my favorite Sylvia Plath quotes, the one that I read to you on the break. Being born a woman is an awful tragedy. Yes, my consuming desire to mingle with road crews, sailors and soldiers, barroom regulars, to be a part of a scene, anonymous, listening, recording, all is spoiled by the fact that I am a girl, a female always in danger of assault and battery. My consuming interest in men and their lives is often misconstrued as a desire to seduce them or as an invitation to intimacy. Yet, God, I want to talk to everybody I can as deeply as I can. I want to be able to sleep in an open field, to travel west, to walk freely at night. That one really resonates with me because I vividly remember having a few conversations with boys in my lifetime who tell me that the way that I speak to men, aka being a funny, intelligent woman that cares about what other people are saying to me, is often construed by other men as me wanting something out of them or flirting or and what have you. So that it really just comes out of them. I love making friends and I love talking to people and I love getting to know people and I love getting to know their lives, and if someone's funny, yeah, we're gonna hold a conversation for an elongated period of time maybe, but that almost rarely ever means that I think that they're cute or I want anything from them.
Or you're flirting with them. Yeah. You know, the irony of that is that I tell some of the female friends that I have, you know, that I will see men obviously flirting with them, like obviously, and I'm talking married women getting hit on by people sometimes who are friends of their husbands, what have you. And genuinely, most of the time, women are like, we are the opposite. We almost never assume that what you're doing is flirting with us, even if it's blatant. We're always on tenterhooks of like, I can't tell if he likes me. I can't tell if he likes me. Whereas men,
the other end of the sword is you don't want to look like a crazy girl who assumed that, oh, I didn't even like her, bro. Like, you know.
Right. And it's exactly what they will do. They will gaslight you if you try to call them out on it, if they're not, you know, genuine in their intentions, or if they were just sniffing around and didn't want anybody to know that they were attracted to you or acting on that for whatever reason. But Yeah, women, though, we're so paranoid about the opposite that we're trained to just assume that, he'll let us know if he's interested in us. And you pretty much have to just spell it out. Like,
but then boys think that girls are playing games because they don't want to come off like... Yeah. It's just, it's a double-edged sword.
It is, and we have to think about... And then, I won't even get into... If you do appear to be too flirtatious, you're going to get judged by the men that want to associate with you, but then talk about you behind your back, and the women, oftentimes, that are supposed to be your good friends. It's just like you can't win. It's another way in which we just live a double standard, and we live completely different lives than men do. Her talking about wanting to be able to go into these spaces without having to constantly worry about being assaulted. In general, I'm not saying that men don't have these issues, don't ever get assaulted. They do, and usually it's by other men, but they don't have to walk around constantly being in fear of, just like a couple of weeks ago when you were walking to the store in your neighborhood in broad daylight going to get a coffee at 10 a.m. Right. And that
started following me. Yeah, that was very strange.
Right. I wonder, did Sylvia's mother give her... the things that I keep equipping you with, the pepper spray and tasers and, everything just to go through life. And
one of the other, or I guess the last quote that I wanted to discuss was one that I wanted to bring up a minute ago, or at the beginning when we were talking about how she didn't want to die. And I couldn't find it, but I found it. And it says... I feel the weight of centuries smothering me. Some girl 100 years ago once lived as I do, and she is dead. I am the present, but I know too will pass. Or I know I too will pass. The high moment, the burning flash, come and are gone, continuous quicksand, and I don't want to die. So
doesn't that just break your heart?
Yeah. No, it's really terrible.
And one of the things I was thinking about, I'm glad you read that because I knew there was something I wanted to talk about before we go. Part of what just infuriates me and I think made it icky for me to really dive into her psyche for all these years is what is just the most awful is that I think that she would be furious to know that the world remembers her as this sad girl.
Yeah.
That she is the poster child for depression. And the problem is that most of her best writing was from that place of horrible pain that she was in. But what if she had support? What if she had better mental health care? What if she didn't run into Ted fucking Hughes?
Yeah.
And she was able to get past that. If the Mandy at 29 could see the Mandy at 49, I can't tell you the relief, just the sheer relief it would have been to know that it was all going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart that she never got a chance to publish beautiful works that weren't about her disease and her sadness, that weren't about the worst frickin' period of her life with the worst man on the planet. Who knows?
And I mean, she was so young, too.
So young. She was 30.
Yeah.
She was 30 when she died.
Yeah.
It just, what could she have been? Who could she have... like we were talking about, I think she would have killed it on Twitter. I think she would have been
she would have eaten
hilarious.
Pinterest up.
Right.
Yeah.
And the world didn't get that because she got derailed and didn't get the support and the help that she needed. And she got gaslit by a terrible, terrible man. And, as you know, that is I've seen too many women in my life settle for what horrible relationships because they think they can't do better. It's why I've been lecturing you about that your entire life. It's, my biggest fear as a mom is that you're going to run into a Ted Hughes that's going to gaslight you. And I know that that's just kind of my worried brain, because you are supported and loved. And I know that you can always reach out, but it's just a fear because there are so many of them.
Yeah.
And I've known the few. I'm not going to name any, but I've had these Ted Hugheses in my life, and it takes a strong person and often a good support system to overcome a trauma like that. And I just hate that she didn't get to do that. All right, we're going to wrap up here on Sylvia Plath. I have been dreading this, really, truly, because as we covered, she and I, Sylvia's been a bit of a joke between us for years because Ava has enjoyed her so much through the Bell Jar, and I genuinely thought that I had very little for her except contempt, and I was so pleased and sad to discover that she was an incredibly talented woman who did not walk through life begging for attention because of her problems. She just ran into some demons that she couldn't outrun. Our sources for this episode are the Encyclopedia Britannica on Sylvia Plath, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, and the Sylvia Plath Food Diary, What Sylvia Ate on Twitter. If you would like to get in touch with us or leave feedback or just say hi, you can email or send us a voice message as an attachment to dinnerforher@gmail.com. You can visit my Facebook page where there will be a post for this next episode, and you can leave feedback in the comment section or send us a message through Facebook Messenger. I want to say I'm so grateful for my friend Amber. She has been posting for almost every episode. She's a voracious reader, and she's definitely going to be a guest very soon, and she's been posting some reading suggestions that inspired by our guests, so I'm kind of curious to see what she's going to have to say about Sylvia. I'd also greatly appreciate it if you would like, review, or comment and share on your podcast listening app of choice. That really helps me to broaden our audience and get more people excited about amazing women from history. A big thank you to Mark and Pirate Core Entertainment for all of his hard work and for giving me this platform. Please visit the Pirate Core website and their Facebook page where you can find this podcast and many more, including my other project, What's On Tonight, with my bestie, Becky. It's also got its own Facebook page at What's On Tonight. What's On Tonight is a spoiler-filled podcast about TV, movies, and more. We are getting ready this weekend to record our roundup episode. We're going to go back and rewatch the entire first season of the HBO Max medical drama, The Pit. We've also got an interview coming up with one of the stars of The Pit, Supriya Ganesh. So you want to check us out there and join the conversation. I also want to give a really, really big thank you to my daughter, Ava. While I wasn't thrilled about Sylvia, I've been looking forward to doing this with you for a long time, and I appreciate, because I know you're very busy right now. You've got a lot of work that you're doing. You just recently moved out, and I know you're getting ready to start your teaching program. So I know this took some time for you to invest with me.
I had a really great time. I really enjoyed it. I have not had a lot of time to kind of utilize my degree or do any research or anything recently, so it was fun to take a break and be able to do that on somebody that I really enjoy.
I'm glad you thought that. I was hoping that you would enjoy taking a few minutes and just going back and remembering how much you really liked and got a creative spark from her. And I really want you to take some time and go back to writing poetry. I miss reading your...
I need to.
You're very good. A talent like that should not be wasted. Thanks everyone for listening. I'm going to continue the tradition of letting our guest of honor have the last words as we push back from this table, digest what we have nourished ourselves on, and go about our lives. I'm going to try something a little different here. One of the things that I found interesting this week was that I think I maybe mentioned before she passed, Sylvia did a BBC radio program where she read several of the poems that ended up being published in Ariel. I was so shocked to hear her voice, Ava. I guess I just always thought she would sound very Marilyn Monroe-esque, like very breathy and kind of tragic and fragile. She sounds like she could be one of us.
Really?
Except that she's got this very, very deep Massachusetts, like moneyed Massachusetts accent, almost a transatlantic accent.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try playing here for us her reading her own poem, Lady Lazarus.
Lady Lazarus. I have done it again. 1 year in every 10 I manage it. A sort of walking miracle. My skin bright as a Nazi lampshade. My right foot a paperweight. My face a featureless, fine Jew linen. Peel off the napkin, O my enemy. Do I terrify? Yes, yes, Herr Professor, it is I. Can you deny the nose, the eye pits, the full set of teeth? The sour breath will vanish in a day. Soon, soon the flesh the grave cave ate will be at home on me, and I a smiling woman. I am only 30, and like the cat, I have 9 times to die. This is number 3. What a trash to annihilate each decade. What a million filaments. The peanut-crunching crowd shoves in to see them unwrap me hand and foot. The big strip tease. Gentlemen, ladies, these are my hands, my knees. I may be skin and bone. I may be Japanese. Nevertheless, I am the same identical woman. The first time it happened, I was 10. It was an accident. The second time I meant to last it out and not come back at all. I rocked shut as a seashell. They had to call and pick the worms off me like sticky pearls. Dying is an art, like everything else. I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I've a call. It's easy enough to do it in a cell. It's easy enough to do it and stay put. It's the theatrical comeback in broad day to the same place, the same face, the same brute, amused shout, a miracle that knocks me out. There is a charge for the eyeing of my scars. There is a charge for the hearing of my heart. It really goes. And there is a charge, a very large charge, for a word or a touch or a bit of blood or a piece of my hair or my clothes. So, Herr Doctor. So, Herr Enemy. I am your opus. I am your valuable. The pure gold baby that melts to a shriek. I turn and burn. Do not think I underestimate your great concern. Ash, ash, you poke and stir, flesh, bone. There is nothing there, a cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling. Hear God, hear Lucifer, beware, beware. Out of the ash I rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air.
Whew. Now, Sylvia, guys, thank you, everyone, and please come back next time to see what incredible, powerful woman will be joining us for dinner.